Hello there, and welcome to my little arty corner here on YouTube. I'm Angela Porter, and I like to say thank you for joining me, and thank you for everybody who keeps returning to my channel, and a very warm welcome to everybody who's new as well. And thank you for all the beautiful comments and queries that you've left for me as well. And as this video is uploading, fingers crossed, I'll have enough energy to answer them. If not, I will do very soon, I promise. So I hope you're all okay. Today is Monday the 24th of April. April's nearly over. Less than a week to go. This time next week it'll be May. So yeah, so the year is flapping away, and I know that I'm a bit behind on my work for my next colouring book, because I think the deadline's the beginning of June, but they always work wiggle room in for me, so it's never an issue. And as the book is something that is near and dear to my heart, the kinds of designs I love to do, then hopefully there won't be too many problems with them. But here we are. What you can see in front of me is a drawing I've been working on, well, yesterday and today, this morning, and I finished it now apart from colour. And once I add colour, I'm going to go back in and add more textural patterns or filler patterns in some way. I have put far too many lines in some places, and I'm crossing my fingers that alcohol markers won't smear the ink. If they do, I'll just have to live with it. But I'm going to try and work in the same direction as the pen lines, so if there is any smearing of the ink, then it should go in the same direction as the pen lines. Fingers crossed. I've used quite a lot of black here, black contrast, and so it's an unusual kind of thing for me, and it's quite chunky as well in feel, as in chunky in terms of detail and fineness of line and everything. So what I thought I'd do today is I have a piece of this is marker paper. This is marker paper as well. It's Daler Rowney, so it's very thin, but it's specially coated for markers. It's also extremely smooth, and I find it a joy and pleasure to draw on. And why I don't use it more often is beyond me. Yeah, I have no idea. And it's not that it's hideously expensive. The Ohuhu is, but this isn't. So, you know, pack of it is less than half the price probably of Ohuhu, but it's much nicer for using markers on as well. The markers seem to sink into the Ohuhu paper, whereas these are designed to allow the ink to dry and not penetrate very far, and to dry on the top, so you get more intense colours on this paper. Not so on this one, I'm discovering. So what I thought I'd do is I'd use this, and it's tall-ish and wide, you know, it's sort of like a bit narrower than normal, like, you know, A5 or whatever. The proportions aren't A4, you know, sort of like cut down, or A5. But I just thought it'd be a nice size to use, and perhaps to draw some of these borders in here. And I'm using it quite wide because I like the width of things, but it also means that you'll get to see, right, okay, let's have a look. Let's zoom in a bit. That'll do. I think you'll be able to see me there. And it gives you a chance to practice the patterns across the width. I'm just using a pencil here. It's a mechanical pencil by Pentel. It's a graph gear one. And this one is 0.3 millimeters, so it's very fine. I can't remember what leads I've got in here. Probably 2B. But I think they might be the diamonds from Uni. I can't remember exactly what they're called. But the diamond refills aren't meant to smudge and smear. They're supposed to resist it to a degree, which is why I like it. Okay, so I've done this. And I'm going to keep this on its side, because what I'm going to do is I'm just going to randomly draw in some lines. Some can be straight. They can be wide, they can be narrow, they can be super narrow, like this. So what I'm doing is just starting to split this up, but all straight lines are a tad boring, so let's add some shape and structure here. So I've created some that are like mountains, and I do want a straight line underneath. This one I'm going to do a series of wibbly lines, I suppose. They're not identical. I don't want them to be identical. I want them to be different distances apart. And I think that'll do for that section here. And I do want to go back and double up on these edges here, because I want to make sure that I remember to leave space with some of my patterns as well. So I may come back in and add some lines there. So that'll do. And this one I definitely do want to aura. It doesn't have to be exact and precise. It's just a guide, and it's a reminder that I want to leave space between the bottom part of this section and the top part. At the bottom here, I'm going to do this a little bit differently. I think I'm going to split this into 3 roughly equal sized sections. I'm going to put my borders in, like so. But I do want to create a border at the bottom, so I'm going to make that a narrow one, just like this. So these can be panels of patterns done in a different way. So you don't need necessarily to copy this exactly, but it'd be nice if you can have some, if you're going to draw along with me, some wiggly lines, zigzaggy line, and various straight lines. And I may use a lot of the patterns that you just saw in my drawing I've done recently, or you may see, let me just check the autofocus is on. Just want to make sure. There may be others that I pull out of my head with things that I like. Now to draw with, I did dig out a Micron 05, which is hard to see because it's got sparkly letters on, but I think that would be a bit too thick for this. And I've got a Micron 03 and an 01, because I know I will have thinner lines here, finer lines. And I'm working to the scale of the paper. The piece of paper you saw to begin with is A4, which is roughly American letter size. It's a bit shorter and a bit wider than letter size, that's all. So I used a Uni Emott 0.4 Everfine fine liner. And I've shown these before, but if I don't show you, somebody's going to say, what pen was that? So hopefully, there you go. Uni Emott. They come in a whole range of colours, and I really do like drawing with these. They are pigments, permanents, and then they're no more affected by alcohol markers than microns or uni pins or Copics. Copics are supposed to be, they are alcohol friendly, but they still can smear, which is why I'll often run a kneadable eraser over my drawing before I add alcohol ink, especially where there's a lot of black, just to pick up any loose pigment that I can to minimise the smearing. This one actually might work. Yeah, I think I'll use it anyway for the borders. So you might hear a strange noise. It's because I'm lowering my chair just a bit, actually quite a lot. Okay, because my head was a bit too far away, or my eyes were a bit too far away to be focused with my glasses on. So I'm going to try and move myself to one side and draw, so you can see what my pen does, and try and keep my hand in out of view for you. So I'm just going to draw along these, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to deliberately allow my line to be a little bit wobbly. I am not looking for perfectly straight lines. For some reason, I like perfectly straight lines, but there is something about slightly wobbly lines that fills me with, I won't say pleasure or joy, but just makes me smile a bit. And I think they then become a bit more forgiving if you aren't sure about your lines. I think it's Maria Thomas of Zentangle says they add character to lines, and they do, they had that human element. But I find if I'm having trouble drawing perfectly straight lines, I often get a wibble in them. So if I deliberately put wibbles in, any ones that come along naturally are disguised by the deliberate nature of the ones I'm drawing here. So let's just get along with these. And if they're not perfectly parallel, I'm fine with that as well. And I'm drawing quite quickly because that's what I do. And I do draw lines in one sweep because I am able to. I don't just move my wrist, my arm moves as well. So this line here, I'm not filling in. Okay, I'm not drawing around that one, I'm leaving that one. So this one, I haven't got any wobbles in that upper line that I have here. Now for this one I need to be careful because I'll draw this one in, but I've allowed my pencil lines to cross over and I don't want the crossovers in the sections. So I'm going to draw this bottom border in like this, and just a thin one at the bottom, just so that we edge all of our borders in the same way. This is my preference for doing things like this. I'm going to turn the paper this way, and then I'm going to draw these vertical lines in which now appear horizontal for these sections, just like this. And I'm not going to do any corner rounding or line weight with this pen because I will end up with a bit of a mess. So I prefer to go back with a finer pen to add those little details. I'm also going to draw the side lines on all of these. Oh, look at that, I didn't cap that end off. So I'm going to create my template here. And you can see which areas I've left and inked in, these ones here. Now I can erase the pencil lines out, and I will erase them before I add any colour. And what I want to do here is with these, I am going to also pop in these double lines here, because I don't want to draw a straight line, but I want a pattern of patterns within this pattern. Yeah, I know, I can't think of the right word. Look at that, I'm making a pig's ear of that one, but it's in pencil, so it's fine. So this is going to be fun. I hope it's going to be fun. All right. So what I will do now is I will try and zoom in again. Yeah, look at that. So you can see exactly what I'm doing. And again, I'll do my best to keep my hands out of the way. Can't guarantee it. But we're going to start with this narrow border at the top. I'm just moving this around some on screen, in view. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to fill this with little boxes of different widths but the same kind of height, with gaps between them. Now I may fill these in with black, or I may use a colour to fill them in, but I'm just really, at the moment, all I am doing is putting in the bare bones of the patterns and textures I'm going to use. So you can see I'm not even thinking about how I'm doing it. I'm trying to keep the corners rounded, I do have to say that. If you prefer to do a regular pattern, do a regular pattern. So wide, thin, or one wide, two thin. You know, you get the idea. But I quite like the more random quality here. And where lines aren't very neat, I will work those out later on, because I know what I can do about all of this. And again, it's deliberately adding some messiness to the lines with wobbly ink to make them thicker. Wobbly inking. I'm into wobbly inking, aren't I? There we go. So there's the first one done. Just that simple. Okay. This one here is going to be a little bit interesting, because I'm not going to draw boxes, but I am going to draw lines from top to bottom, but they're not all going to be vertical, and they're not all going to be the same direction. So I'm just splitting this up. Sometimes I'll create almost like a triangle, or perhaps a couple of them. I'm just using random kinds of shapes here just to modify this and to give an interesting pattern. And again, I'm trying to be quite random about it, varying the angles, how many I have going in one direction, and so on. And you know, just making sure that I don't have to, I don't repeat the same pattern perhaps more than I need to. So that looks a bit odd with one there just joined, so I'm looking for one where there's a wideish space where I could do that again, and I think I'll do that there. So that one stands out on its own, but where I've got another similar kind of event here, then it looks very similar. This one I'm going to divide into, let me move it up onto the screen, just the angle so you can see it all. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to divide this into little squares. They don't have to be exactly the same width, more or less the same width will do. And they're not really square shaped, they're a bit narrower than you'd call a square. But they're close enough that, you know, and again, I don't mind a bit of variation, it adds interest. And a bit of humanity. I think it may be part of me wanting to rail back at AI art and say, I'm human, you can't do me. Well, I can hope, can't I? Okay, now for this one it's going to be interesting because I'm going to draw down to the top line, straight line down and down, and I'm going to create shapes like this where the top will be pretty much the same distance. So to help me with that, I'm just going to draw in a pencil line. I know, I'm using pencil lines everywhere. But this is how I work. These are the tricks I use when I'm creating colouring templates for my own art. Pencils will erase because I have to create art that is good enough or perfect, you know, as near perfect, I suppose, as I can get it in its way for publication. Then I make sure I use all the tools available to me, including rulers for edges and so on, because it's expected of me. But it spills over into all my art, although I tend to be a bit more liberal with wobbly lines and so on. Okay, the next one I'm going to make a little bit narrower, just like that, and then I'll fill the tops, and I'm going to follow that line, and yet it curves, so I curved the bottom line the same shape as the pencil line. This one I'm going to take down to that central point down there. So again, I'm just going to turn this around. We are. I'm still on. Yep, still on the screen. So this one here, and perhaps I'll do a very narrow one. The next one, I'll go up and over this shape here, and I'll get almost like a flag shape or a pennant shape there. Just move this paper around a little bit to make it easier for me to draw and to keep my hand out the way. So this means that my work won't be quite as neat as it usually is. So as I'm finishing this off, and you can see what I'm doing, I have had a bout of tonsillitis and it's just left me extremely exhausted. It wasn't bad enough to go to the doctor or the pharmacist for antibiotics. It seems to have cleared itself up. My voice is still a bit hoarse, but all the COVID tests I've done in the last week have been negative. So it probably isn't COVID, but I'm going to be very cautious if I don't have to go anywhere at the moment and not go anywhere, because yeah, it's not good. So I did cancel the washing machine repair appointment on Saturday because I wasn't well, and I also had forgotten kind of in my flap and panic that I'd agreed to do half of a workshop online with Tracy Hoff. She had, oh gosh, a workshop to do with tea, an afternoon tea, Zentangle inspired art. And my job was to show people how to draw the teacups and teacup and cupcake and teapots, and how you do that with simple shapes as guides. And the work at the end of it, what I saw people had done was absolutely fantastic. And my teapot and cup were not symmetrical and were a bit wobbly, but by the time I'd filled them in with patterns, doesn't really matter. It's got that quirkiness about it. And if you look at modern art, you'll see there's a lot, I say modern art illustration, there's a lot of that imperfect, impressionistic kind of watercoloured looseness in a lot of illustrations these days. And I'm beginning to get to grips with it, I suppose. Now, this one here, I'm going to do something that will be a little bit different. Now then, I do want to leave a gap at the bottom as well, so I'm going to put a pencil line in there. And this one, I am going to put a series of dashes, a dashed line along here, like sewing. Trying to keep the dashes about the same length, but if they're not, I'm not going to worry too much about it. But I just want to leave a little gap between them, and you'll see why in a moment. Okay, sorry, I think I was off screen for the beginning, but you get the idea. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to turn this slightly the other way. I ought to get some masking tape out and stick this down in place. But I'm going to draw vertical lines up to this pencil line, like so. Okay. If it goes a little bit further, don't worry. If it's a little bit lower, don't worry, because nobody's going to come along and use a ruler to measure it. And we've got quite wide gaps between these, and I'll show you what we're going to do. They look like a capital letter T upside down, but I'm going to change that now. Got a bit of something on there. So what I'm going to do here, and I am going to pick up my 03 micron in the hope that this one is a fairly new one, and I'm just going to create a triangle at the bottom, and I'm curving the lines in. My inspiration for this has come from archaeological plans of sites, and also you find this pattern in prehistoric pottery, which is a particular, I wouldn't say an interest, but whenever I find images of it, I love to look at it. We're talking here Neolithic and so on. Very beautiful, a lot of it. Very imperfect, but still beautiful in its imperfection. And all kinds of things were used to create these shapes and patterns. From bird bones to twigs to bits of corded grass, or anything really they could find to use, fingers. It's absolutely beautiful. Now then, this is where it's going to get fun, because I'm going to draw another line here. Straight line, straightish. I think I'll be good enough. And I'm going to go back, and in between these sections here, I'm going to put another dashed line part way up, because these sections are quite big and I would like to fill them in. I filled these sections in a different way in other drawings, but I wanted to try this today. So I've done that. Sorry, I was off the screen again. And again, I'm just going to draw vertical lines up. So I'm still very tired. I've still got a bit of a hoarse voice and a very dry mouth as well with it, which comes with that kind of infection. but I know from years past it can take me a couple of weeks to recover from a bout of tonsillitis, even a light one like this. So I'm being kind and gentle to myself. As far as my mood goes, my emotions, my thoughts, they're okay. Mostly, you know, I've had some gloomy thoughts the last couple of days, but they don't last. You know, it's little things will trigger the gloomy thoughts in me, and I seem unable to hold on to them, which is a good thing. Doesn't mean that I don't, you know, I can't hold on to any thoughts, because I absolutely can. But it's ones that would lead me down a dark path. And it seems that it's impossible for me to follow that dark path. It's like the antidepressants are guardians to the gate that would open. And I actually like that analogy or that metaphor for them. So, you know, I've got enough space on some of these that I could actually put another one in between these, but I think I'll leave it at 2. Now that's going to make an interesting options for adding colour, because I could add one colour for the bottom half and another colour for the top half, or, you know, dark and light. I'm not quite sure yet what I'm going to do there, but I quite like that one. It's quite an easy pattern as well. There's a rhythm to that, and it's a lot more organised than the ones I've done already. Okay, so here I am going to ink in the top one of these lines. I did have to break that one in the middle. Sorry, I think you might have... I'm trying to remember to look at the screen to check I'm on screen. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to divide this into squares using the size of the gap between the top and bottom line as a guide to how wide I'm going to make my boxes. So as the gap narrows, I'm going to make the boxes a little bit narrower and then a bit wider again here. Now that one is perhaps just a bit too wide for this, but I'm going to leave it like that. Now I could have just used lines like this and had lines far apart here, getting closer and closer together until they were closest at the top of this curve and then starting to go apart. And again getting closer, closer, closer until they were really close on the edge, and you get an optical illusion that would make this look like there's a wave underneath, and that can be fun. But I think what I want to do here is I'm going to draw boxes inside these shapes, and by boxes I'm following the shape of each of these sections. And if my lines aren't exactly parallel, I'm not going to fret and panic about that, because the overall effect is what most people will see, surprisingly, and unless you point out the imperfections, most people don't actually notice them. It's a shocker, isn't it? So I've got that there. And I'm not quite sure what I want to put in these. I think I do, possibly. I'm going to use the 01. I'm going to use quite a fine pen here. And what I'm going to do, apart from using this to attach lines where I haven't, is I'm going to put a cross inside each one. And you'll see why in a moment. And I'm going from corner to corner regardless of the shape. I'm just following the same idea from section to section. And then what I think I might do is I'm going to put a black box in here, and I'm using these crosses as a way of drawing the box within, and I want these lines to be roughly parallel to the edge of that shape that we've drawn there, because they are all a bit different, so you just kind of have to trust yourself on this one. And what I'll do, I'll just draw the rest in, and I'll use a thicker pen to colour them in, because it will take me ages with a fine nib, and I'll wreck the fine nib. But for the little ones here, I am going to use the fine nib just to put that square in the middle. It's not so easy to see them, so don't worry about being precise there. As long as there's a dark centre, the others will clue people into what you've done there. Again, so your brain is a little bit on the lazy side, to be honest. All of ours are, and it does a great job at pattern matching. So if it recognises something as being similar to or the same as something else, your brain sort of goes, oh, I know what that is, and fills it in for you without actually taking in much information. So even though these aren't precisely correct, your brain will think they are because they look like the rest. And that's why, unless it's a blatant kind of stand out mistake, something that everybody would notice, like a giant ink blot, unless you add ink blots to make it look deliberate across the piece, it will stand out and people will go, oh dear. But with a repetitive pattern, tiny imperfections won't be, or even quite big imperfections won't be noticed. So there's that section. So in fact, this one here can most probably be a little bit bigger. We've got a lot more white around the edge than we should have, so I'll just go back and adjust those, and that looks a bit better. And then this one, the very first one, needs that bit of adjustment as well. That looks a bit better. And these look like we've got holes going inward, and I'm going to work with that when I add colour and shading, because I do want to add white dots, so it's like windows through to space. So there's something behind this. Okay, so we've got this section here, and I'm going to fill this in. Actually, I think I'm going to use this section here. And again, I'm going to use a series of vertical lines, or vertical-ish lines, to split this up into boxes. That's half a box on the end, but I may use it as a whole one. And I'm going to fill this section in with some flowery kinds of patterns. And I think I'm going to use a cross again. So these are almost variations on a fragment, a basic unit of a Tangle pattern, or a cell, or a tessera. So it's the basic repeating unit of a pattern, and because this is a half one on the end, I will draw it as a half one. Then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use my 03, because I'll be able to get a slightly finer line. I'm going to draw petals in, almost like two figure of eights, perpendicular to each other. Something else I've been doing over the weekend is adding patterns and motifs to my A5 6-ring folder, where I've decided that's going to become my reference for all things patterny and tangly, motify. I've got quite a few sections. I know I've got the original, or the official Zentangle patterns. I've got my favourite Tangle patterns, but I've also got ribbons and borders, organic, fragments, motifs, all kinds of things, I think. Oh, medieval, arts and crafts, Art Nouveau, which are big influences as well. Sorry, I think you missed that. It was off screen, but I think you caught the end, so you can see what I'm doing there. That's done now. Not going to do any more to that. But I've got these two sections here, and I want to do something with them that could be quite fun. So I think with this one, what I'm going to do, and I'm going to use continue using the 03. I'll put it on the side so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to start by drawing a random shaped, well in this case it's a triangle, but it won't always necessarily be a triangle. And I'm going to kind of fill this space in one way or another with these shapes. Now I'm not trying to do triply in the sense of Zentangle. I'm using whatever shapes will fill this space in whatever way they do. So down here I'm going to leave that one as a square, or squarish shape. It's a parallelogram really, and it's an irregular parallelogram. Oh no, it's got two parallel sides, so it is still a parallelogram. It's still an asymmetrical. Yeah, it is asymmetrical. And again, I've got another shape that's more like a kite shape, and I'm just going to let these lines fall as they will and create patterns and split the section up in an interesting kind of way. That's what I'm looking for, is interest. And I'm not going to overthink this or think too hard about it. Because when you overthink things, things tend to become very organised. Though I am thinking stopping and thinking every now and again, okay, what direction do I want to take this in? Now where do I want to go with this? So I'm going to go like that. Oh, I've split that up into a space that's a bit big, so let me just move that there. So I've got a small diamond there, or triangle there. Put that there, it looks a bit like an envelope, so we'll put a line in like that. This side now, I've just got a little bit left to fill. So I think I might split that up. I'm going to move that there, there. Like that would work. That would work there and down there. So I've got an interesting kind of net going on here, kind of a net. And the top line is a bit it's a bit untidy. So I'm just going to use my thicker pen just to go over this and tidy that edge up with a line. And if this line is a bit wobbly and wonky, or thinner, thicker, it'll still look a little bit tidier than what was there to begin with. And I think I'll do the same with the bottom line, so it looks like it's a deliberate statement of this line. Lots of choices how to fill this in. I could fill in like stained glass, different colours. I could choose to use gradients, so I could have darker colours at the edge and lighter colours in the middle to give some volume. I could colour it in with a rainbow of colours, or whatever I wanted to do, but I don't know yet. Now this section here, I'm going to do something very, very simple in there. And what I'm going to do is just it's the Zentangle pattern Shattuck, but I haven't drawn the lines in. I'm going to leave the lines. Let me move that up, sorry. I keep going off screen, forget. So I'm using the pencil lines as the guide for where the lines that I'm drawing stop. And this is basically with zigzagging. So I've created a triangular kind of shape here, so I'm going to fill that in with lines that are parallel to that first line there. Again, I want to create a triangle shape here, so do that, and then I work backwards to fill that triangular shape I've just filled in. And again, and again. And because these lines all finish on the same kind of line, the pencil line, your brain will see a border there almost. And you can enhance that by making the ends of these lines that little bit thicker. And that is something I may very well do with a finer pen once I finish drawing this. Or once I've inked everything in, because I'm going to keep my ink here to a bare minimum, but I did want to ink this in. I don't think I'm going to get colouring and inking and patterning and everything else in, you know, adding white highlights and whatnot. In this video it could be too long. I'm on 40 minutes already. But I'd like to get these filled in with patterns, so at least we've got something to work with. And yeah, I know I can cut a lot of this out, but I do waffle on. So you get this as I'm doing it in real time with my waffling, because, you know. Okay, now here I've got to think about how would this work. Well, it would come down here and these lines would be going parallel to this one sort of, so I'm just going to fill that little section in just like that. And then we've got this. So let me just zoom out so we can have a good look at all of this. In fact, I'll zoom out again so we're well zoomed out. And that's how that's looking so far. Not very inspiring, but I know that colour, extra pattern, extra line work and everything else will make such a difference to this. These sections down here, I'm only going to zoom in just the one time this time. Okay, with these I'm going to make panels of patterns here. So I am going to, I've cut this into three high and down the middle, and yet the top one is bigger than the other two. And do you know what? I am fine with that. I really, really am. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a floral pattern, and it's going to be a bit of a different kind of pattern. So normally we work towards the centre of sections, but with this one we're going to work away from the centre in a certain direction, but it's going to be different in each box, if that makes sense. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to draw 6 lines here, and then I'm going to go in and I'm going to add curved lines around the edge to create petals. Now if this thickens the border lines, I am fine with that, because we're going to go back and fill in all these little white bits around the edge, which you'll see there with ink. You could leave them as they are, but I like the black, I like the contrast. So now I need my flower centre in a different place. Again, I'm going to add some lines just to split this up in different directions. They don't need to be symmetrical or anything. And I'm going to draw petals in again, using those lines as my guides for the side of the petals. Wonderfully asymmetrical flowers, and I love the way this looks. Now I don't know where I found this pattern or who I saw created it so long ago, but it's one that I come back to time and time again. Not on a regular basis. I don't use it in every drawing I do. This here looks very very straight edge there, so I'm going to break that up with just another line, and that feels better. So again, I look at things as I go and I make those little adjustments. Okay, so here, well, I've got one towards the top there, so how about one towards the middle? Oh, that's the same as that one, but it's fine because they will look different when we've finished. And again, I find the lines useful to draw in first, but once you get used to it, you can draw these petals in as you wish yourself, but I just find it useful to use those lines. Again, just filling those little bits in. Oops. Goes outside the line, it's fine. All my lines are wobbly on the edge, so it's all right. Okay, so I'm going to go up to this side now, and I'm going to start speeding up my work here, because hopefully you've got the idea. That'll be fine. Again, there's a lot of ink in this pattern in some ways, but I think that ink is what makes this pattern so wonderful. As I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking about how lovely it will be to do this kind of pattern in a pale colour on a background of a paler colour, as you know, something that's very subtle and in the background. And I might try that on the drawing I've just completed today. So I've got to think now where I'd like the next one, so I'm going to put one towards the middle there. How about up there? It's very close to the edge, but that's fine, it works. No matter where you put them, they'll work. Perhaps not touching the edge, but yeah, because I'm beginning to get a little bit braver with colour, kind of. I'll show you my drawing of the teapot cupcake and everything I did on Saturday, and I've started adding colour to it, and I'm going, oh Angela, why did you choose those colours? You know monochrome or analogous is the way for you to go. Well, they are analogous, but yeah. So there's that. It's got that feel, very 1960s kind of feel to it, I think. Could be wrong there, mind, but you know, that just needs a little bit more ink there. It looks a bit weird compared to the others, and I haven't gone over these lines and these ones, so they're looking a bit funny here. Thinner and spindlier than others, so all it takes is just that little adjustment and everything looks very similar then. Hang on, that one needs some extra ink there, a bit round there. So there's that one, so that's quite nice. Now in this section I want something that's fairly open, because we've got a lot of ink here. I may put something that's got a lot of ink in this side, but I want something a bit different here. And I think I'm going to go with Crazy and Zeppel, which again is a Zentangle pattern, but I tend to do this in my own kind of way, because I think they use crossed lines and things to separate out the sections. But I'm just going to create a wobbly wonky grid work, and yet I've gone over the line there. So what do? We just thicken the line as if it's meant to be. In fact, if I thicken this line as well, then these will fit in. And then I'm just going to add some wobbly lines here, and I might just add a bit of a line there. Nobody says they have to be exactly the same, and I'm going to curve one there. And we've got a grid work for Crazy and Zeppel going on here. And I don't want to put crosses in or anything, I'm going to use these lines as they are. And Crazy and Zeppel is you're trying to fill these sections, that one I'm just going to fill in black, with an orb, so it fills as much of the space as possible, but not the corners. So it's almost like rounding inside the corners, but without filling them in. Though I suspect I'm going to end up filling them in, because that's what I tend to do. So this one I'm going to treat as if it's a complete section, because if I do it that way, that's what it becomes. If I was doing something like Knightsbridge, you know, a checkerboard pattern, then it would have gone off the page, wouldn't it? Possibly. Not a complete one. Oh, looks like I'm going to fill these little spaces in, because I've just filled a couple in by the way I've drawn them, with the shape of the space. It is optional whether you do that or not. I think in the Zeppel pattern, mostly these little sections here in the corners are left uncoloured in, but I quite like them when they are coloured in. So I am taking my time, and I am making sure I'm going over the lines that are already drawn so they all become more intense and thicker, darker, like so. So you could leave it like this, and that would be, if I zoom in, leave it like this and that'll be fine. But I think I'm just going to go back and fill these outer bits in, and then I've got something that looks, oh, I've just lost one of my little pebbles, but I'm fine with that. There. So I just think that I end up then with like a cobblestone road, and that's always quite interesting as well. And it leaves us opportunities for adding things inside them. The choice is yours as always. You may not like any of these patterns, or you might like some of them. Maybe you want to try some of the ones you've not seen before out, and that's fine. The ones at the top, so these ones here, are inspired by Rebecca Blair, as is this one here. So, and I'll go back over these. This one I think is a Zentangle style pattern. That Shattuck, which definitely is, that one I've certainly seen in Zentangle work. This one I'm not so sure about. This one definitely is a Zentangle. So, you know, it's entirely up to you which you use or how you do them. But I am going to add something to these pebbles in a moment. Trying to add ink as neatly as I can. I might have been better off using a finer nib, but I'm going to persevere because I've nearly done. And I do like the way this gives me this lovely, again, it's that feeling that these are floating on top of space. It's almost like, you know, a weird window or some kind of membranous fabric or material that, you know, comes between us and space. So you can guarantee there's going to be some stars put in those black bits. But I'm going to go back to my 03, which is still uncapped, which is not good practice. Should really cap them in between using them, but I forget sometimes. And what I'm going to do inside these is I'm just going to draw a shape, and it doesn't have to be exactly the same kind of shape or size as it. This one I'm just going to put a black dot in or shape in because there's no way I'm going to be able to draw a shape like this. Just draw what your pen wants to draw. Don't overthink it, just let it happen as it needs to. Of course some of them can be this way, they don't have to be. That one isn't, nor is that one, or that one, or that one. So there's that there, which is quite nice. I said I was going to not do one that's got quite so much black. It most probably has just as much black in it. And this very last one, I think I'm going to keep this idea going of patterns. I think this one I can do in quarters because this panel is a little bit narrower than the others. And I'm going to go back to crosses in the boxes, and I'm going to do a third variation on this. I will. So I'm just crossing each box. You can do diagonal lines. You can see these have joined up into one line and so on, but I sometimes get confused with this and end up going in the wrong direction or whatever it is I'm doing. I don't think you can with this, but I like to do it that way because I know I've got it right then. Okay, so this one is a little bit, a little bit different, but I am going to draw some petals in again. So we're going back to flowers, but I'm drawing them in with the crosses in the middle. That's not what I wanted to do, but it's what's happened now. So I didn't need to draw the crosses in. I was looking at a different pattern. It's okay though, it'll work out. It'll be very similar, and that's what we want. So I'm drawing like rice seeds or leaf shapes or petal shapes on either side of these lines, you know, the 4 lines in each box. And what you may notice is that although we know we've got petals here and flowers we're drawing, you see we've got what's called a meta pattern forming in the middle of this pattern. I'll show you what I mean now. You see where there are circles being formed by this. So there are many ways of looking at this pattern and making use of it. So you might be able to see there's, can you see these 4 here? They make a circle, whereas 4 on there make a petal. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to aura inside these little shapes here and just fill it in with a little bit of ink. This is almost like a little sampler. It's a bit like a, you know, cross stitch or needlework sampler where we're trying different stitches out, different motifs out to learn skills, to try things out. And here it really is quite like that. And this little bit of black just gives a completely different feel to this pattern. I'm not sure if it brings the circles out or the flowers out or both really. I think it depends on what you focus on in the image. And you can flip-flop back and forth between the different variations. Quite like that, it's fun. And of course, when you add colour, shade, highlight, if you decide to add any further textures, then you can bring different aspects of this out as you apply those effects of colour and gradient or shadow and highlights like that. So I'll zoom out fully. You can see it all. Well, it's not quite fully, but it's, you know, close enough. So this is where I am at the moment, and I've just got this very last section here to do. So it's going to be slightly over an hour, but I'm sure you won't mind if we complete this. So what I'm going to do here, these are all quite geometric patterns, so I think I'm going to finish off with something that's quite geometric. And I'm just going to put some curved lines down here that don't quite meet the top and bottom inked line. Oops, I've touched it there, it's fine. It'll happen. My mind wanders. My mind was wandering to what I'm going to cook myself for my main meal today. And oddly, I've got a hankering for Brussels sprouts. It's actually not an oddly. I really love Brussels sprouts. I know, not everybody does, but this person here, I'll hold my hand up, I really love Brussels sprouts. But how am I going to do Brussels sprouts? I don't know. I'll work that one out later. I think I've got an idea. I might make some kind of vegetable stew with some kind of protein. So pulses, you know, probably lentils, or perhaps some kind of vegetarian, vegan beef, you know, beef, or yeah. I actually have got steak style strips from Quorn. I couldn't tell you if they're anything like steak, but they're savoury and they taste good. I don't like Quorn chicken. I never liked chicken anyway. So I never really liked meat full stop, but you know, for some reason I prefer the more savoury meats, and I've always found chicken extremely bland, and it also always looked like an animal. So never ate lamb, refused to eat lamb, because there were lambs in the fields near where I live, so I could see them and they were cute and I wouldn't eat them. Yes, I know, I have problems. So there we are. So I've done a whole host of patterns here today, and it's 1 hour and 23 minutes. I know I waffled on for a bit first because I showed you my artwork and so on. But how many patterns are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 patterns. Oh, unlucky for some. But there will be more patterns going in as I add intricacy to it and fill of tangles and so on. So the last thing I'm going to do, or there's two last things I'm going to do before I finish this. One is I've got an eraser here and I am just going to erase the pencil lines out, but I'm also going to make sure that I spend some time going over the black, the pen lines, because I will remove any pigment that is loose. There we go. So that gives me this, and that's the pen I mostly used, and I did use a couple of Sakura Microns as well, but I'm not going to put those in the image. Let's see if I can get it straight. I can use it then as a half decent picture. No, it's still not straight. That's as close as it's going to get. Picture for the, for the thumbnail. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed this one, and I hope you'll give something like this a go. As I say, it's a lot like a sampler, and I find things like this quite fun because they're a lovely way to try out patterns and see how they go together or don't go together. This one looks very bare and a bit boring at the moment because there's no colour, no shadow, but that can be added. So have fun, take care, find time to be creative, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye for now.